Okay. All right. So good morning to everybody. It's good to see you. We are in Reish Mem Tet. We are in Sif Aleph. Last week when we left off, we were discussing the the topic of traveling late in the day, Friday, heading into Shabbos. And we had talked about, last thing we mentioned was the Aruch HaShulchan's discussion about traveling by train, and keeping in mind that not always getting to the station where you are heading is the final destination. You have to actually get to where you will be staying. So you have to keep that in mind as you plan your travels on Friday. And also, more generally, things go wrong on Friday. The whole reason that Chazal were cautious about travel on Friday was because the cute way that Aruch HaShulchan put it was the Satan is hard at work on Friday afternoon, causing all of us problems getting to where we're going. And so we want to make sure that we're not running into Chil Shabbos issues or issues where we even make it on time, but now we have nothing really prepared for us to eat on Shabbos. So we're going to go back now to the Mishnah Brura. So again, we're on Reish Mem Tes, and we are up to Sif Katan Gimel. Just to remind you what the Shulchan Aruch was, where this comment is coming from, what it's built off of. The Shulchan Aruch had said that again, we can't walk more than 3 parsaos in order, which is, we said only approximately 3 miles. So, sorry, 1 parsa is 3 miles. So, talking about somewhere between 9 and 11 or so, 9 or 12 miles, something like that. You can walk that amount in order to get to your house, in order so that you ensure you get to your house or wherever you are staying for Shabbos with enough time to prepare Shabbos appropriately. And that's whether you're going to somebody else's house or you are going to your own house. So on the comment of Shaholech Lebeso, Sif Katan Gimel, so he writes here, the Mishnah writes, V'af shehu mechavein shebebeso yelo yoser oneg Shabbos. Even though it's true, I have in mind that in my house, I'm going to have a better Shabbos, as opposed to being stuck somewhere else where I don't violate the prohibitions of Shabbos, but sometimes just being stuck in a hotel room isn't exactly the greatest way to delight in the Shabbos. Mikol makom aser, even though it's better at home, nevertheless it's prohibited. Shema lo yedu klami biyoso lo echinu b'shvilo. It's interesting here. It almost sounds like that there's somebody at his house, or if he's going somewhere else, but it sounds like he at his own house. No one knows he's going to be there, and so whether it's some sort of caretaker for the house or I'm not exactly sure why because they won't know he's coming, right? They didn't live in a time and age where they had communication like we have. Okay, I understand that part, that they may not have expected that this person was returning at that time, but they will not have prepared appropriately for this extra person. Now, that may seem ridiculous to us, as the Mishnah Brura writes in this next line. How could you not prepare enough for this one extra person that you weren't planning for? I mean, it sounds like there's a family there, and they cooked for 4 people, but not for 5 people. And he writes here, V'mdinos elu, and our countries, the Mishnah Brura writes, Rov b'nei adam mechinim tzarchei Shabbos v'revach. Most people over-prepare for Shabbos. They don't just cook exactly the right amount for the 4 people, and so if you're the 5th person, well, I'm sorry, there isn't enough food. Such a concept is keneged the tradition, which is to over-prepare. Right? Tzarchei Shabbos b'revach. V'lachein ein nizhar mazeh klal. Like, don't worry about that. If that's your concern, oh well, because when I get to where I'm going, back to my house, they won't have expected me, so therefore there won't be enough food for 1 person that Shabbos, and that will be a whole disaster. Don't worry about that. Whether you're going to back to your own house, or you're going to somebody else's house. If you know that you can make it to somebody's house for Shabbos, who will bring you in, don't worry, they'll have enough food for Shabbos. That is the minhag of the Jewish people, is to overcook. And he says there are many achronim, many of the late poskim, who he says, I saw that they wrote this. So it's true. Maybe it's not as big a deal to get somewhere, a few hours before Shabbos, because the bottom line is they'll have food, right? That was the whole purpose here at the beginning. You won't have tzarchei Shabbos, that you won't be able enough time to prepare all the needs for Shabbos. But if you're getting somewhere where they're celebrating Shabbos, they're going to have enough food that you'll be okay. But the one thing that he's concerned about here, and some of the achronim are concerned about, is that you should really be careful not to go or to travel somewhere close to evening, right? Which is a whole different concern. It's not really about is there going to be enough food. The whole concern about Samuch Erev is that now you're cutting it close to Shabbos. Now you're really, you're talking not so much about preparations, you're talking about Chilul Shabbos. So he says, because sometimes, as the Aruch HaShulchan wrote, sometimes things happen on Friday. You're traveling, get stuck in traffic, you take a wrong turn, whatever happens, and now you're really going to be traveling into the beginning of Shabbos. Kibal ushpiza, or not even that, by the way. He says, let's say you arrive 30 minutes before Shabbos, so you make it in time. But the people who you're going to, the Baal ushpiza, that's where you're staying, the host. Oh, afilu beveso, or even in your own house, and your spouse doesn't expecting you home. Again, these are days before a cell phone and communication the way we have it, so you have to remember that. Kishabas samuch leShabbos, if you come really close to Shabbos, mosifin levashal bishvilo mechalin Shabbos will happen, because the minhag of Medina is that we overcook for Shabbos, so you'll come 30 minutes before Shabbos, and then the Baal Abayis or the Baalas Abayis is going to say there's not enough food, and they're going to go right back into the kitchen and they're going to start cooking again. And then it'll be cooking into the 18 minutes. And, it could be, a 1 minute over shot, it's 1 minute past Shkia. And now actually it turned into a little bit of a Chilul Shabbos situation because people were cooking extra right before Shabbos. Sometimes you don't get to the hotel or to your house until it's actually dark. Right now you're really in trouble, right? Then you were actually driving or whatever. However, you were getting there. I was on Shabbos. And people, those days they were probably riding animals, or they were, driving the animals, right? That's prohibited on Shabbos. But nowadays you can add car to the example. Also, just going. Let's say Shabbos starts, you're outside the tchum of the city, or you're out, and you travel outside the tchum of wherever you are in the middle of nowhere to get to that city where you're traveling. So there's Chilul Shabbos that's involved here. Therefore, a person has to really be very sort of pay attention and to kind of get to where they're going as quickly as they can. Even if it's in a village, right? So you need to try to make sure that you're getting where you're going. And if you realize I'm not going to get where I'm going to need to go on time, so to make proper arrangements, wherever you may end up making Shabbos. Velo yisitenu hayetzer lomar, and don't let your yetzer hara advise you and counsel you incorrectly to say, "Oh, dayon gadol v'haderech tov." There's plenty of time. There's no traffic. New York City. Never traffic in New York City. Hey, you'll make it. So you have to make a good judgment call and not just let your heart, pull at your, tug at your Yetzer Hara tug at your heartstrings and say, no, you got to get where you're going, even though it's clearly a bad decision. Let's say, let's say, though, it happens to be, you don't plan this out, but you are on the road, you're walking, presumably, or you're riding an animal in this situation, and it's Ben Hashmashros, meaning candlelighting, not just candlelighting time, but Shkia already came and went. But it's not yet Tzeis HaKochavim, so it's not yet completely dark. You're now in the twilight zone. But you are already in the tchum of the city. So you are, let's put aside any oraisas that you could possibly violate here. So you're already within the bounds of the city. You're just not at your house. So mutar lahaloch besocha, you can walk along as you please throughout the whole city, as Kibisimin Taf Yud Vav, which is talks about the laws of Tchum. What you need to do is you need to get off the wagon or the horse. The wagon, of course, being driven by the horse, or some sort of animal, maybe a donkey. You need to get off. Ayin Siman Reish Samach Vav, which we will get to probably in a few months from now, I hope. V'sham Yevoar Im Yirtzeh Hashem, and we'll talk about it there. Now, I don't want to give everything away, but just to give you the quick version of what you do if you're ever stuck in this situation. I myself have never, I think, been in this situation. It is not a fun situation to be in. The one time I'm aware of somebody it's happening to, they called me plenty of time before Shabbos. They realized that they were stuck in traffic, essentially. They were in a cab, which actually worked out really well, because one of the things is, you notice here, he says you have to get off the horse and the wagon. The reason is because those are Yisurim D'Oraisa. Remember, Shvisas Behemto, as we've talked about in this class, your animal has to observe Shabbos too. Again, if they do the animal is doing its own thing, that's one thing. But if you're riding your animal, or how you're driving your, you're hey, here, go and carry me and my bag and whatever, that's your animal doing work. If your animal walks alongside you, or even if you have like a thing where you hold the rope or whatever that's tied around the animal, and you kind of lead the animal, that's different, because we have the principle of Hachai Nosei at Atzmo, that a living creature really is carrying itself, even though you're kind of directing which way it should go. But the practical, if you're ever in a cab, is really to get into a cab, because Bein Hashmashos is already a suffix, whether it's Shabbos or not. We're machmir because it's a suffix d'oraisa, because maybe it is Shabbos. But if you're in a difficult situation, so rather do things al yedei nochri, get into a cab, which is already now d'Rabbanan, and you should try to have them if they can. When you get to where you're going, they should open the car door for you. If you feel comfortable explaining that, why you can ask them to open the door. And so I had this person arrange ahead of time. I said, if it's Uber, so the payment you've taken care of really from the beginning, and the tip. So you'll tip the person if you want after Shabbos. The tip thing never goes away on the app, so you can tip them after Shabbos, not a problem. And you stay in the cab until Tzesa Kochavim. Tzesa Kochavim gets more difficult. Then you have a separate calculation of, okay, if I stop, if I get out of the car here on the middle of the Van Wyck, is that a sakana, or, and oftentimes the situation may be actually a sakana where you are, and you may be sleeping on the streets because you have nowhere to go. So then that's a different calculation. But during that Bein Hashmashos period, if you can knock down what you're doing to d'Rabbanan, it's already a suffix d'Oraisa, and you're doing it, doing it al yedei nochri. So there's a heter that says you can do that al yedei nochri during that time. So therefore, that's what you would do. If you were to call me in that situation, I would tell you, please try to get yourself into a situation, park your car somewhere, right? Leave your car somewhere if you see it's going to happen. Then get into a cab, and that will hopefully that'll buy you an extra probably 40 minutes until Tzesa Kochavim, which may make a very big difference in getting to where you're going. This person did make it before Tzesa Kochavim, so it all worked out. But yeah, that's what you do. That's a short way. We'll talk more when we get to Reish Simon about what you do. All sorts of cases. What do you do with your animal? What do you do with your wallet? What do you do with your right? So there are all sorts of things. What do you do with all these things? The short of it is, though, that you would, in a case of a car, you would try to find your way into a cab and have a non-Jew take you to the rest of the way. Okay, let's go back upstairs to the Shulchan Aruch, where the words V'hani Milei. Okay, so V'hani Milei, these words that you have 3 parsos to get where you're going. That's Keshu b'yishu b'mokom sheyuchal lahachin tzarchei Shabbos. That's what we're talking about. That's when there's a yishuv within those 3 parsos. There's a neighborhood where you can actually appropriately prepare for Shabbos. Aval in b'mokom shu sham hi'efshel lahachin tzarchei Shabbos. If you are either currently or those 3 parsos don't get you anywhere where you can actually properly prepare for Shabbos, it's great. So you'll travel far, but you won't get anywhere within those 3 parsos. She'enu b'makom yishuv batuach, or you end up in a neighborhood, but it's not a safe neighborhood. You don't feel like this is going to be a good Shabbos from a safety perspective, or you end up somewhere in the middle of nowhere, right? That's obviously a yishuv makom she'eno batuach. So muter lelech afilu kamar pasos. Then you're allowed to walk further than 3 parsos. You can walk a number of parsos to get to some sort of yishuv where you can actually properly prepare for Shabbos. If you send ahead of you some sort of note or some sort of messenger that you're going to be somewhere for Shabbos, say, I'm coming over for Shabbos. Now, again, in our day and age, you send a text message and say, I'm coming, that counts. Then kamar parsos b'chol gavna, and then for sure you can go a number more parsos than 3 parsos because you don't need to prepare Shabbos. The presumption is here that you told, whether it's someone in your family that I'm coming over for Shabbos, or you told you reached out to a shul because you knew you're going to have to stop somewhere. Do you have a place to say yes? We'll set up the food. Great. So I'm okay. Even if I show up 30 minutes before Shabbos, I'm totally ready from a food perspective for Shabbos. So therefore, it changes the calculation of how many parsos I'm allowed to travel. Let's take a look at Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Daled. V'hani milei kishu b'chulei. Rotze lomar b'mokom shekalu hashalosh parsos. When can I only travel the 3 parsos? Sorry, when is it that that rule applies? That's when I get to a place where I can actually legitimately prepare for Shabbos. That's when shekalu hagim parsos. That's when the 3 parsos rule comes into play. Kain Kosav Halavush V'Ayin Be'Eli Rabba. So says the Lavush as well, and says to take a look at the Eli Rabba, another Achron as well. Sif Katan Hey She'eno V'Chulei. This idea that you're not going to be in a safe place for Shabbos, so that also allows you to travel further. Da Amida Baderech Eino Makom Batuach. Certainly, if you're going to spend a night on the road, that is not a safe place to be spending Shabbos. And I actually recall it from this past summer. Now, just coming back to me, I have a cousin who is the director of one of the more well-known camps in that a lot of actually the kids in our shul here go to, and a number of non-Orthodox communities ascend to this camp. He had an awful situation. I can't remember, was this summer or the previous summer? It may have actually been the previous summer. They were coming back on a Friday with the kids or something like that, and their belongings were all there, and the bus broke down or something like that in the middle on a Friday. They were coming back. I guess, I don't know why on a Friday. I thought they don't do these things on a Friday usually, but okay. They're coming back. It's clear as daylight. So they somebody comes out to repair the bus. Again, they're in the middle of nowhere. Somebody comes out to repair the bus. It's clear as daylight that they're not going to make it before Shabbos. Not even before Tzeisak Kochavim, I think. So I remember there was a whole thing. The shilas were flying around like what to do. You have all these kids who are heading back to the tri-state area. What's going to happen? How they're not going to make it. What are they going to spend Shabbos on the side of the road? They don't have food for these kids, on the bus to make a Shabbos in some hotel last minute either. So I think the psak I remember that they end up getting was that they could drive all the way to the end. Again, Naju was driving the car. They drive all the way because why? Because it's sakana. What are the kids? They're going to spend a bunch of teenagers. Not even teenagers, by the way, younger than teenagers. Yeah, a bunch of camp age kids. They're going to spend Shabbos on the road here. On the bus. Maybe you pull over in a hotel with no food. It doesn't make any sense. And the psak was that because of sakana, they could just have them go all the way to the destination, which I think was in the 5 towns, and they couldn't take their stuff with them. I think that they arranged for the non-Jewish bus driver to put the belongings inside the building, and the kids, I think, walked from there to wherever they lived in the 5 towns, or to their friend's house if they didn't live in the 5 towns, and that's how they spend Shabbos. But again, when you're in a Malkum Sakana, you have to you have to do what you have to do. You should try not to get into that situation. That's the whole point of the simon, but sometimes life happens. right here, if you're on the road, that's the chazaka is that you're in sakana, right? That's the assumption. It's not a safe place to be in on the road. And who says, okay, what about if I have food? My car have food, right? So if you're just stuck on the road though, and there's really nobody there, right? You're like in the middle of nowhere. There were in those days, of course, they were worried about robbers and bandits and whatever happening at night. So so get somewhere where you feel safe. Not to your final destination, but get somewhere where you feel safe. Get to a hotel, get to a something where you can, if you have the food, so that's great. So you'll go in your hotel room and you'll spend Shabbos in the hotel room. It's not fun, but you'll be okay. Lastly, be careful. Yeah, so you could travel more if you know that your food is going to be taken care of, but you should just be cautious because again, the Satan is at work on Friday, doing what he has to do, as we talked about in Sif Katan Gimel. Okay, let's look at Bays here up on top now in the Shulchan Aruch. We'll start this next topic. This is actually a topic near and dear to my heart because it relates to something I've been learning with my 8th grade students at the beginning of Arvei Psachim. You may be familiar that the 10th chapter begins Erev Psachim Samuch LaMincha Lo Yochal Adam Ad Shetechshach, that close to Mincha time, the person is not allowed to. This is for Erev Pesach. The person is not allowed to engage. Lo Yochal. The pshat is that you shouldn't eat. The subsequent Gemara quotes a brisa that on Shabbos and Yom Tov, the halaz of machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that you're not allowed to eat from min mincha olamala, from mincha katana, about 9.5 hours into the day until Shabbos starts. Why? So that you come into Shabbos with a really good appetite. You're not full. That way you enjoy your Shabbos meal. Rabbi Yossi disagrees and says, no, you can eat all the way up until dark, not a problem at all. And he even thinks that you can continue your meal. If you end up having a meal that you started on Friday afternoon, you can continue that meal into Shabbos, and then you could bench at the end of the meal, and you would follow it up with Kiddush. We don't paskin that way in terms of that part. If we were eating before Shabbos started, we paskin like Shmuel, and even this, many poskim don't like it, but it's the reality of the Gemara. Is Shmuel says, Pores mapa umakadesh, that you can cover the food over with a cloth, like a challah cover, and you would then make Kiddush and then uncover the food, thus sort of signifying Shabbos has started, and now this meal is transformed into a Shabbos meal. Nevertheless, so we have a machlokas, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, about whether you can eat all the way up until Shkia, till when Shabbos starts. So let's take a look here. With that background in mind, you have this machlokas about coming into Shabbos hungry, don't eat. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi says, don't worry. Bays. Also, likboa the Erev Shabbos seuda. You're not allowed on Erev Shabbos to be koveya a seuda. And I'm not talking here about having a snack or having even what we would call normal lunch. You're not allowed to make a seuda, a feast. Umishte, right? And like a party, kind of like there's drink and there's plenty of food. She'ena ragel b'yamechol. That's not normal for the weekdays. Right? Suddenly on Friday afternoon for lunch, you're having a feast. That's not normal for a weekday lunch. That's not appropriate because now you've really denigrated the kavod towards Shabbos because you've engaged in a very large meal, which will probably take away some of your appetite for the Shabbos meal,
including a Sudat mitzvah.
So hold on. For Sudas mitzvah is going to be an exception. The Ramah is going to quote that if you have a bris milah or a pidyon haben, so then you are allowed to engage in that. Because those are not just even Sudas mitzvah. It has to be Sudas mitzvah, a Sudas mitzvah bismana. A bris milah happens whether you like it or not on the 8th day, assuming everything's okay. And pidyon haben happens on the 30th. On the day after the 30th day, right? It's the day after. I always forget. I think it's on the maybe it is the 30th. I can't remember. It's either the 30th day or the day after the 30th day. Nonetheless, if there's a mitzvah bismana, we'll see in a moment that is going to be an exception to the rule. But take a look here at what's not an exception to the rule. Vafilu hisudas erusin. So let's say there is a betrothal. Again, those days they separated the erusin and the nisuin. They didn't have the full wedding at that moment. But the couple was betrothed to each other, and thus there was no ability for those, unless they got a divorce. There was no way for them to find other spouses, and that by this point also when the Shulchan Aruch was writing this. I don't know. I'm not sure. The Takana of Rabbeinu Gershom, I guess, was more for Ashkenazim, but I think that the Sfardim to this day also abide by the idea that you have one wife. So that was the reality in the time of the Gemara, Mishnah Gemara. I don't know how much it happened so much, but as those who are doing Daf Yomi, I'm not, but those who are doing Daf Yomi will find out very soon when you get to Yevamos. There's a lot to be said for not having multiple spouses. Not just because it creates a confusing masechta, but also the term that's used in the Gemara for the co-wife is a Sarah.
Sarah, right.
Which already tells you how troublesome the relationship was between the two co-wives. Probably wasn't a very comfortable situation for the husband either, with that in mind. So you're not allowed to engage in a Sudas Erusin either. Yipnei Kavod HaShabbos, because Shabbos, because of the honor of Shabbos. And what's the difference between what Steve brought up before about what I could say, a bris milah? Bris milah, you can't control what date happens. Erusin, you can control what day a person gets betrothed. You can arrange that you should have arranged it for Thursday or do it Sunday. Person should enter into Shabbos with appetite to eat the Shabbos meal. And the entire day is part of that prohibition. That means even in the morning, again, bris milah aside for a moment, you're not supposed to have a meal that is abnormal for what you do on a normal weekday. If you are the kind of person who has the time to make extra special meals on Friday afternoon, or Friday breakfast, I am totally interested in how you find enough time for life. So I don't know if this is something we need to worry about, but you're not supposed to have an abnormally large meal on Friday. Makes sense. It's really it's a din and covered Shabbos. To continue here in the Rama writes that U'seuda shezmana be'erev Shabbos, a Seuda which falls out on Erev Shabbos, Kagon, Bris Milah, Pidyon Haben, which again, the Torah designates there's a day for that. And it should be done Abo Bayom on that day. So mutter. Okay, that's different. So now suddenly you're having a breakfast with an omelet station, and there's a bagel with cream cheese and lox, and you had a rogalach, which is not your normal Friday breakfast. But okay. Yeah, it was a bris milah, and anybody who participates in the, who's present should partake of a festive sudas mitzvah. It's a mitzvah, and that's really the reason for the heter. It's a mitzvah. Once it's a mitzvah, so we throw things out the window, and it's a mitzvah bismana. Really, is why it's a difference.
I believe you were at a bris Erev Pesach.
That's
right?
Correct. Oh, yeah. So excellent, right? So Hinda's grandson had a bris Erev Pesach, no less than Mohel kind of got delayed or something like that. I remember, and they were cutting it close to the zman of when you have to stop eating chametz.
Right.
So yes, I do not normally eat that well on Erev Pesach.
None of us do.
Yeah, but it was great. But I was actually kind of full for most of the day. When you really there's not a lot to eat, and not a lot of time usually often to eat in preparation for Pesach. Kainir Ali, he says that's what it appears to me. This is what everyone in Bnei, all the Ashkenazim are doing this. If there's a bris milah, we're all having a nice big meal on Friday morning. Okay, that makes sense. That doesn't trouble me. Now, let's continue in the Shulchan Aruch. We'll come back and we'll rework through the Mishnah Berurah probably next time. V'le'echol v'lishtos li kviyos seuda. You can eat and drink without establishing a real formal meal. Afilu seuda shirogil. Afilu seuda shirogil babachol. Says you can even have a seuda that's normal for the weekdays. Meaning, if you have a nice lunch every day where you have a salad and a sandwich, so have a salad and sandwich. If you normally have pizza for lunch on Fridays, don't withhold yourself. You can have what's normal. So by the letter of the law, the entire day you can begin such a meal. again, what is normal. You should not start to have things that are abnormal for your diet on Friday. Suddenly, you just want to go nuts. Keep it within the realms of normal. Everyone has to define that is for themselves. By the letter of the law, that is permissible. Notice how he says minadin, which means he paskins like Rabbi Yossi in the Gemara in Arvei Pesachim, that it's mutter to start to eat at any point during the day on Friday. Aval, mitzvah lihimona milikboa seuda shenohu ba b'chol mitesha sha'os ulamala. But he says it's a mitzvah. Now, it's not a real mitzvah, but it's a mitzvah, probably maybe a mitzvah in covered Shabbos, but to prevent yourself, lihimana, or to refrain from establishing a meal that is even normal for what you would have on the weekdays, right? Nothing crazy, from the 9th hour of the day and onwards, which is really reflecting the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. We don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. It's clear as daylight from the Gemara we don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. I can't go into it fully now. Basically, there's a story that's recorded in the Gemara of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and I think it was Rabbi Gamliel was sitting around on Friday as it was late in the day, and they were eating, and then Shabbos started, and they were. So Rabbi Gamliel turned to his friend Rabbi Yossi and said, "No, Yossi, Yehuda likes to stop. First of all, he doesn't even like to eat late in the day, but they were eating. Let's say they started earlier enough before the 9th hour. They started their meal, and he." Bottom line is, he's like, I don't want to follow Rabbi Yehuda's opinion because all these students are around here and they're going to get the wrong impression of what the halacha is. And so they continue their meal into Shabbos in order to teach the students a point that we don't follow Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, we follow Rabbi Yossi's opinion. So, it's also very clear from the Gemara, just the context in the Gemara there, that we paskin like Rabbi Yossi. So it's not surprising that that's what the Shulchan Aruch reflects as well. But it is interesting that there is this idea that you should kind of tip your hat to Rabbi Yehuda, try to stop not having even, it's not a snack, by the way. Milik Boa Suda sounds like you're having a meal, nothing crazy. So he said, don't have that the last 3 hours of the day before Shabbos starts. Again, this does not preclude anybody from drinking water, having snacks, drinking a cup of coffee, whatever you feel like you need. That doesn't sound like you need to refrain from that. Okay, that is Sif Beis, and let's just do the first Mishnah over here, Sif Katan Zayin, and I'll stop. Also, Ligboa, you're not supposed to establish a meal. V'isa b'Gemara, what's this from? Even the whole day, even all Friday, having a big meal is a big problem. There's a story in the Gemara. The Haisa Mishpacha b'Yerushalayim shekava seudasa be'erev Shabbos v'ne'ekra. V'ne'ekra. There was actually, the Gemara talked about two families. There were two families that had misfortunes in their lives. They were ne'ekra, they were uprooted. What happened? One of them, they on Shabbos, instead of going to the Shabbos afternoon Torah learning in their town, would always eat during that time. And so their fortunes didn't turn out well. That's what the Gemara says. And the Gemara says there was another family that ate on Erev Shabbos. That was Kovei Asud on Erev Shabbos. Now, they don't say a time. When it comes to the Shabbos part, they were very particular. Of course, you should be Kovei Asud on Shabbos. But they said, particularly they were Kovei Asud right when, there was the communal Torah learning in the on Shabbos afternoon. So they had misfortune. But there's no time specified when it comes to the Erev Shabbos part of that story. So what do we learn from this story, whether how literal to take the story or not? Clearly, the Gemara is trying to teach us a lesson about the importance of not being koveya a large seuda on Erev Shabbos, because that's why this family ended up with sort of all this misfortune in their life. So I just wanted to share that part with you. That's where the idea that you're not supposed to have a large meal on Friday comes from that Gemara, with a story from that Gemara. I will pause here. Any questions?
No, good.
All good. Okay. Yeah. We've moved on to some topics here that are very relevant and very practical in terms of we can see ourselves being in these scenarios. So this will be a little bit. These next few simanim will be a little bit easier to wrap our minds around than some of the things we were talking about with the business partnerships that we were having, and some of the dinim d'Rabbanan and that were guiding those situations. Here we're really kind of focused on a lot about Kavod Shabbos and how we prepare for Shabbos. in order to make the Shabbos a much better experience.
I do
Okay.
have one quick question.
Yes.
Not me, but I know somebody who, it really isn't me, but I know somebody who likes to open a bottle of wine and sip it while she's cooking. I happen to have been invited to Shabbos dinner, and well, we were, and I walked into the kitchen and she was sipping wine, and I said, I don't know, it just seems weird to do that before Kiddush. She says, well, how can you cook without a glass of wine in your hand? Do it all the time. But so I think wine is also, even though it's not a big meal, I think that's something that is somehow inappropriate before Kiddush. Am I wrong?
Well, certainly once Shabbos starts, right? Then as we'll see, I
No,
think.
no. It was Shabbos hadn't started. She was still cooking, actively cooking.
Right. So by the letter of the law, she's okay, right? Because we follow Rabbi Yossi's opinion, and I don't know that would be considered a kavia, like that's being likboa seuda. It's having a nice drink. So probably by the letter of the law, she's okay. So we can find a way to sort of justify what that practice. If you are going to refrain from it, that sort of fits under the category of what you see here at the end, like that sort of that tip, the cap to Rabbi Yehuda of mitzvah lihimona milikboa suda shenog b'chol mitesha lamala. So you're trying to refrain from something in order so that you make it a more special experience on Shabbos. I think would be a fulfillment. So I'm not saying that what you did was actually wrong. Maybe it's in some ways a kiyum of kavod Shabbos. It's a fulfillment of saving that wine, the taste of the wine, and that you saving it for Shabbos, and you're not filling yourself up. Wine can also be very filling, by the way. I don't know, but at least you're saving that wine, that space for wine, for Shabbos. So again, I think that's a praiseworthy thing. The other person, I don't think that they violated a prohibition, though. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes,
Right.
Steve. Go ahead.
So unrelated to this, but while I have Hinder and Tommy on the